Fake ones are useless. Don't come to the family meeting, okay? I quickly glanced at James, but he too had a mocking grin. Amy's real mom was so beautiful. Not like this worn-out lady. Seeing my hurt expression, James looked annoyed. You were just here to take care of Amy, and now you're not needed anymore. Thanks for your service. True, we don't need a nanny anymore. Thanks, I guess. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Amy never really saw me as her mother after all. And neither did James. They both saw me as a convenient person to look after Amy. I don't consider people like that as family. Alright, maybe it's best if you meet Amy's real mom. I muttered and dialed a number. My name is Jessica Peterson, and I just turned 50. I've been working at a renowned trading company since I graduated. Thankfully, it's a pretty well-known company, so many recognize its name. I've been married to James for 20 years. I met James through a friend's introduction. When I noticed others getting married, I panicked and begged my friends to introduce me to someone. James struck me as a very serious person when we first met. He had black hair and wore glasses. He dressed modestly in a shirt and slacks. I've never liked flashy people, so I found James's demeanor comforting. After that, we went on many dates. Our dates mostly consisted of dinner after work. We never went to amusement parks or movie theaters. In fact, I hardly ever saw James on weekends. But I didn't mind. Even the briefest moments with James made me happy. And then, about 6 months after we met, James suddenly proposed to me, saying, "Would you consider dating me with the intention of getting married?" By that time, I had already fallen deeply in love with him. So, when he asked, I was overjoyed. And I said, "Yes, I want to be with you, James." James seemed thrilled with my answer, and we started dating. Then he told me something I didn't know before. It was about his child. "I actually have a child from my previous marriage," he told me, looking apologetic. I was taken aback, not just by the news of his child but also by the fact that he was divorced. The news of a child was particularly shocking. I'm sure my surprise was evident. But my feelings for James remained unchanged. So I smiled at him and said, "Is that so? Introduce me sometime. We're gonna live together once we're married, after all." James replied, "Thank you, Jessica. I was worried you'd hate me if I told you the truth," James said with a very happy face. And then, he hugged me tightly. Later on, James introduced me to his daughter, Amy, just once. "This is the woman who's gonna be your new mom," James told Amy. "Nice to meet you, I'm Jessica," I said with a smile. But Amy didn't react at all. She hid behind James and wouldn't even look at me. "I'm sorry. Amy seems a bit shy," James said apologetically. "It's okay. Don't worry about it," I replied. And that's how my first meeting with Amy ended. 6 months later, we decided to get married. James was tight on money at the time, so we opted not to have a wedding ceremony. We just got legally married without a honeymoon. Any girl dreaming of a wedding would probably be upset. James sincerely apologized, but for me, as long as I had James, that was enough. So, I smiled and forgave him. We're gonna have a happy married life. I thought about our future life together. Our newlywed life began, but it wasn't without its challenges. The main problem was Amy. She strongly resisted the idea of living with me. Until then, James and Amy had been living in a one-bedroom apartment, which was too small for the three of us. So, we decided to move to a slightly larger condo. But for Amy, leaving the place she was familiar with seemed really hard. "I hate this place. I liked our old apartment," she cried out loudly. "Amy, the previous place was too small for all of us. Can't you understand?" James tried to reason with her. But Amy just continued to cry. "Why do I have to live with this old woman? I want to live with my real mom." She pointed at me and said, "Hey, Amy." James started to scold her, but I stopped him. "James, it's okay. I can understand it's hard for Amy to accept this new life all of a sudden. Just think of me as a roommate, okay?" I told Amy sincerely. "Jessica." James looked at me with concern. Amy just glared at me in silence. Despite the initial tense atmosphere with Amy, over time, her attitude softened. Initially, she'd say things like, "I don't want to live with this plain old woman. It's so embarrassing, I can't even tell my friends." But I understood Amy's feelings. It must be lonely not being able to live with her biological mother. When Amy was 5, James and his first wife divorced. That's why Amy's memories from that time are somewhat hazy. She would always look at pictures of her real mother, saying, "My real mom was this beautiful, not like you." She'd flaunt the photos at me with a smug look. I figured she was probably just putting on a brave face to hide her loneliness. I tried my best to be patient and understanding with her. I'd always take time off work to attend school events, even if Amy was against it. And of course, when she was sick, I'd stay home to care for her. I sometimes got passive-aggressive comments from colleagues at work, but Amy always came first. To avoid being labeled as a plain old woman by Amy, I studied fashion magazines and changed my style. But with household expenses, I couldn't spend much on clothes. So, I made do with budget-friendly outfits. On my days off, I'd take Amy to places she liked. We visited amusement parks and famous tourist spots together. I did my best to ensure Amy never felt lonely. Still, she'd often tell me, "You're so annoying, old lady." Honestly, I wanted to talk to James, Amy's real father, about it. But James was rarely at home. He was always busy with work. On the rare occasions he was home, I tried discussing Amy with him. But James just brushed it off. "I'm busy with work. You're Amy's mom now, so you handle everything. I don't want to know," he'd often say. I had no choice but to keep trying on my own. Over time, Amy started to change. "Tomorrow, I'll need a packed lunch for a field trip." She began asking for my help. The only mom Amy had was me, so I was happy when she relied on me. "Leave it to me. I'll make something super delicious," I replied with a smile. "You're gonna include fried chicken, right?" Amy mumbled. I found this side of Amy endearing. I felt we might eventually develop a real mother-daughter bond. I continued to put in effort to build a better relationship with Amy. Time flew by, and 20 years later, Amy was 25. Now, Amy was an adult with her own job. She grew up to be a stunning young woman. Currently, she works in an administrative role at a small company. One evening, out of the blue, she said, "I have something important to discuss." She looked slightly embarrassed. "What is it?" James asked, intrigued. Luckily, he happened to be home that day. So it might be the right time for Amy to share her news. "Well, I'm getting engaged. It's a senior from my company. He proposed to me not long ago," Amy reported joyfully. "Really? Congratulations," I responded immediately. Genuinely surprised since I had no idea she even had a boyfriend. "That's great news," James chimed in happily. "Thank you." Amy smiled. Watching James and Amy interact, I felt a surge of happiness. "I'm truly happy for you," I said, tears forming in my eyes. To be frank, Amy was quite a handful. She was often rebellious and took a while to warm up to me. Moreover, with James often away, I had to deal with Amy alone most of the time. Seeing her grow up and prepare to leave the nest was deeply emotional for me. I was deeply moved by the whole situation. As I began to cry, Amy gave me an exasperated look. Then she shot me a cold glare. "Good riddance. Now I can finally cut ties with this old hag." She smirked at me. I choked back the tears that had started. "What do you mean?" Amy responded curtly. "Exactly what I said. Think about it, someone as plain as you, being seen as my mom? Impossible. Did you really think you became my real mom?" I thought Amy was slowly warming up to me. But I was apparently wrong. "No need for a fake. Don't bother coming to the family gathering," she scoffed. I instinctively looked at James for support, but he too had a mocking grin. "Amy's real mom was beautiful. Not like this faded old woman," he remarked. "James, that's harsh." Defeated, I murmured. Seeing my distressed face, James seemed annoyed. "You were just for taking care of Amy. You're no longer needed. Thanks for everything," he said, laughing. "Right, we don't need childcare anymore. Thanks for the effort." Amy chuckled. In that moment, I felt something snap inside of me. It turned out Amy never really saw me as her mother. And neither did James. To them, I was just a convenient caretaker for Amy. They were not my family. The two of them joyfully discussed their complaints about me. Quietly, I left the living room where they were seated. Perhaps the family gathering would be better off with Amy's real mom, I whispered to myself. Then, I dialed a certain number. A week after Amy's engagement announcement, today was the day for both families to meet. Although I wasn't invited, I secretly arrived at the venue. Why? Because right after announcing her engagement, Amy had demanded something from me. You're embarrassing, so I don't want you at the family gathering. But you have to cover the cost. My fiancé is paying for most of the wedding, so we're taking care of this dinner's expenses, she said with a smirk. I didn't appreciate her entitled expression. Naturally, I protested. Why should I pay for a dinner I'm not even attending? Let James pay for it. But Amy's mood flipped immediately. You know Dad doesn't have much money. You have a good job at a major corporation, so just shut up and pay, she yelled at me. I couldn't agree with what was happening, so I didn't respond. Eventually, Amy said, All I want from you is to cover the costs. Just be ready when it's time to pay. She then handed me the reservation details for the family meeting. The address and reservation time were written on it. After that, Amy went straight to her room. Recalling that incident, I was in a room adjacent to where the family introduction was taking place. I had previously asked the venue's staff to book the neighboring room for me. If it was just about the money, I'd think it would be best to show up towards the end of the meal. However, I had another purpose in mind. Luckily, I could faintly hear the voices from the next room. I listened carefully. I'm sorry my mother couldn't make it today. She suddenly fell ill, Amy said, looking a bit down. How phony of her. Telling me not to come and then making such a statement. My wife apologizes. I'll handle things today, James added to Amy's fiancé and his parents. Both of them seemed to be in on it. But that didn't matter to me anymore. There's someone better suited for this family introduction, I mumbled to myself. I then signaled to someone I had previously contacted. Thank you for coming. She gave me a thumbs up and headed to the introduction room. James, Amy. Long time no see. Amy's real mother, known as Susan, appeared in the doorway. Susan. Why are you here? James seemed taken aback. The others were left dumbfounded. I invited her. You don't need a fake when you can have the real deal, I said, smiling from behind Susan. I had easily found Susan's contact through James' social media, and given that I recognized her from Amy's photos. Originally, I researched to allow Amy to contact her real mother. But with the current situation, I ended up contacting Susan. At first, Susan was really surprised when I contacted her on social media. It's understandable, getting a sudden message from James' current wife would typically cause such a reaction. However, once I explained the situation, she understood and agreed to come to the family gathering. When I relayed this to James, his mood changed dramatically. Why the hell did you do something like that? He glared at me with full force. Susan is undeniably beautiful, but she's quite flashy. Apparently, she's 5 years younger than me, but she doesn't seem her age at all. Her hair is colored ash pink. And she's dressed in trendy, youthful clothes from top to bottom. She clearly takes great care in her appearance and looks at least 10 years younger than she is. It's a mystery to me why someone as straightforward as James would marry someone who's his complete opposite. Amidst everyone's shock, only Amy responded. Mom, she murmured, probably recognizing Susan from some old photos. Then, Susan quickly turned to Amy and said, What? Can you not call me Mom? I gave birth to you, but I hardly raised you. And I heard you've been talking trash about the woman who did raise you. Don't you think someone who can't even appreciate their own parents isn't fit for marriage? She looked at Amy with a hint of disdain. Amy was clearly shocked to hear such words from the mother she had only dreamed of. Suddenly, James, who had been silent, shouted. Shut up. You'd probably ask if she loved you. It's your fault for not raising Amy properly. Reflect on that. But, Susan replied without batting an eyelid. It's your fault for always cheating, right? Weren't you the one who wanted custody of Amy because you needed an heir? Even when I begged to see her, you ignored me. In the end, wasn't it Jessica who took care of her most of the time? You didn't raise her either. She fixed James with a cold stare. What do you mean, Dad? Amy asked, clearly shaken by this new revelation. Taking a deep sigh, Susan said. It doesn't matter. A child who belittles a mother who's raised her for 20 years. I don't need you. But your fiancé will marry you, right? Lucky you found someone who wants you. She chuckled. Amy was clearly taken aback by Susan's words. And her fiancé looked pale as a sheet. His parents, eager to leave, were whispering to him urgently. Why should I need Amy or James? Besides, James, you're cheating right now, aren't you? I dropped the bomb casually. Actually, I had hired a private investigator to look into James' affairs. The results were damning. Turns out he's dating 2 girls at the same time. Both from his own company. Showing the findings to James, his face turned an obvious shade of blue. Well, it must be hard juggling 2 relationships at once. Must be tough being so popular. I said with a smirk. James was so shocked he actually got down on his knees. Please, don't tell the company. You know what will happen to me. Sweat was dripping from his forehead. By this point, Amy's fiancé and his parents, only muttering a quick "Excuse us," fled the room. Considering his upright demeanor, he probably didn't want anything to do with Amy, with all her family drama. Wait! Amy shouted as she rushed out of the room, trying to catch her fiancé. James works at a small IT company. If this gets out, he'd surely face a lot of flack. But I had no intention of letting him off the hook. It's too late. I've already sent evidence of your affair to the company. It'll probably arrive by Monday, don't you think? James stared at me in disbelief. Oh my, drama at the office for Monday? That's gonna be entertaining, Susan said, laughing hysterically. James approached me pleadingly. Come on, do something about it. We're a married couple, aren't we? James begged, but it was too little, too late. We're getting divorced. I've gathered all the evidence. Hearing this, James visibly deflated. In the end, Amy's engagement was called off. Her fiancé was adamant about the decision. I misjudged Amy. Not only does she lack gratitude for her upbringing, but she also treats those who cared for her with such disdain. We're done with the engagement. At work, just consider us colleagues. Her fiancé supposedly declared this with a piercing look. Given the embarrassment at the family gathering, the end of the engagement seemed inevitable. Eventually, Amy resigned from her job. Seeing her ex-fiancé every day at work was taking a toll on her mentally. Now, she's reportedly staying home and avoiding going out. She really brought it on herself. Before long, my divorce with James was finalized. James had repeatedly expressed his hope for reconciliation. Can't we give it another shot? I'm just renting my current place, and I hardly have any savings. I've been fired from my job. I can't make ends meet this way, James lamented. As it turned out, James had been let go from his job. Following the evidence I sent, the 2 women he had affairs with were summoned to HR. It was then revealed they were both involved with James. There seemed to have been quite the showdown. Ultimately, the office romance was deemed too scandalous, and he was strongly advised to resign. It was basically a firing. Moreover, James was already 55 years old. He's having a tough time finding another job. But I had no intention of forgiving James for his actions. So, with the strong persuasion of my attorney, I managed to get the divorce finalized. James is truly backed into a corner right now. Though he doesn't have a job lined up, he still needs money to live. He spent so much on his affairs that he hardly has any savings left. Apparently, he's now even behind on rent. If only I hadn't cheated, James sobbed over the phone. But James's cheating is like an addiction. It's unlikely he'll ever change. Perhaps because of James's situation, I've started receiving calls from Amy lately. Because of Dad, the landlord's been on my case about overdue rent. It's the worst. Since you're my mom, come pick me up? Amy casually said such things. With a sigh, I responded. We're divorced, so you're not my responsibility anymore. I'm just an imposter, right? Emphasizing the word imposter, Amy was silent, probably feeling like she'd been hit where it hurts. Seizing the opportunity, I continued. Why don't you rely on your real family, your dad? Or better yet, get a job and take care of yourself? You're an adult after all. I firmly told her. What the hell? I heard Amy fussing on the other end, but I hung up. Goodbye. I murmured and then blocked both Amy and James's numbers. Since then, I've made a new friend. Hey there, Jessica. Long time no see. Susan came running towards the meeting spot, waving her hand. Truth be told, after that day, we really hit it off. We had quite the animated chat about James. It was mostly complaints, but we found so much in common to empathize with. Plus, talking with Susan is always fun. All this time, I had been consumed with looking after Amy and working. So, I hardly had any time for myself. But now, I can enjoy my own time however I please. Thinking about that makes me quite excited. Jessica, you've been smiling a lot more lately. A smiling face suits you better. It makes me happy too, Susan said with a bright smile. Her words warmed my heart. Some say turning 50 is the halfway point in life, but I don't feel that way at all. To me, this is just the starting point. I'm determined to live a life without regrets from here on out.